Hey guys, Craig McCormick here from DestructivePixels.com, and today I want to talk to you about the 5 mistakes I made when I started in photography, and I want to give you some tips so hopefully you don't make the same mistakes I did. So before I get started here, I just want to point out these are only 5 of the mistakes I made when I started in photography. I made a lot more mistakes besides, but these are the 5 big ones. But if these mistakes you didn't do, or you saw, or you did something similar, put it in the comments below. I'd love to hear what mistakes you made and how you kind of corrected them so we can all kind of learn together. Nice cohesive community stuff. Yeah, that's nice. So with that being said, let's jump in and I'll talk about the first mistake. So the first mistake I made is something that pretty much everybody does at the start, and that's shooting at the wrong time of day. Now, normally, especially for landscape photographers like me, the best light is during sunrise and sunset. And that is a very hard thing for people to get right. Not necessarily get right, but also just understand that those are the times you want to be going out. Because when you're starting out, and I'm very guilty of this, when I started, I would go out and shoot about, 10, 11 o'clock kind of stuff because I didn't want to get up at 5 in the morning. And then you come back home and then you're kind of disappointed by your images. And the reality is, and it takes a little bit of time to learn this, is that you need to be getting there for the good light. Now, this good light idea and this whole idea of getting better light can be transferable to pretty much anything in photography, whether it's portraits or product photography or anything pretty much in between. You've got to get yourself into good light. Now, for me as a landscape photographer, as I said, you've got to be up for sunrise and sunset. Now, obviously people prefer sunset because it means they don't have to get up super early. But in my personal opinion and my personal experience, sunrise is often the best way to go about it. There's some really great light there, and often because it's the morning, there will be fewer people out. So I definitely recommend checking out sunrise times if you are going to be doing landscape stuff. But as I said, it takes a little bit of time and a little bit of experience for people to understand that you should be getting up in the morning to be shooting your pictures. But as I said, light in general, you've got to be getting yourself better light. The second mistake I think pretty much every photographer has ever done, and that is using slow memory cards and also slow card readers. While you can kind of get away with having a slow memory card, it kind of becomes a bit of a problem when you're doing stuff like portraits or landscapes. In fact, if you're going to be doing brackets, HDR brackets and stuff like that. But one of the biggest culprits here, and something that I'm really quite passionate about actually, is memory card readers. We're all guilty of this. We buy really cheap, generally from Hong Kong, let's all be honest here, from eBay, like $10 memory card readers from Hong Kong. They're plastic, they're very unreliable. I've had multiple memory card readers break on me over time. They're usually quite slow, they're usually USB 2, although nowadays they are probably USB 3. But it's something definitely worth considering about card readers, because these are the things that are actually transferring your information from your card to your computer. And this is a very vulnerable part of the image and the image process. I've talked about this before in previous videos, where the pictures on your cards will very rarely go wrong. They will very rarely, get completely what's the word I'm looking for? Unencrypted, not unencrypted, but you know what I mean. It's going to get completely ruined on the card. It's very rare that that happens because it's all flash memory, as we all know. But where the corruption, that's the word I was looking for, corruption. Where the corruption usually happens is in the transfer period from the card to the computer. And this is really, really important, guys. You need to be making sure you have a great card reader. Now, I have a card reader myself. I'm just going to pull it up here. It's a Hoodman steel card reader. Obviously, this isn't the one you're going to have to buy. There's other besides it, but just make sure you get a really nice, good quality card reader. This guy I bought at Photoshop World many years ago and is still running solid. It's just a hard steel case and a card reader, USB 3, SD, and CF card. Great card reader. It's something I'm very passionate about, making sure and investing in a really solid card reader, because as I said, that's lasted me years. The third one on my list is going to be very controversial, so please forgive me and please don't put hate comments down below, but it is shooting in JPEG. I personally think this is a bit of a mistake, because generally nowadays photographers are pretty wise up to the fact that they need to be using Photoshop and Lightroom, and if they're not, well, you can be shooting in RAW and JPEG. But what I'm very passionate about is not getting stuck in shooting JPEG. Now, of course, RAW is the better format. That's right, I said it. But the only reason I do bring this up is because, as I said, people get very stuck in their ways when they're shooting JPEG, and they get very confused by the idea of RAW. Now, of course, there are multiple places online where you can learn about RAW and what a RAW image is. And I understand that camera manufacturers aren't really that good at actually explaining what RAW files are. But in my personal opinion, I think shooting in JPEG is a kind of a wrong decision really, especially when you're starting out, because you don't really learn your camera as much. And I was very guilty of shooting JPEG at the beginning, and you process your images and you wonder why there's all these weird artifacts, and you bought an expensive camera and now you're editing the pictures and it looks all grainy and grungy and it looks worse than the point and shoot camera pictures that you were taking, or very similar. And that is because it's a JPEG file and you can only mess around with those files so much. So RAW is definitely the way to go in my opinion, but please don't send any hate comments below, saying you should shoot in JPEG, and I understand JPEG for sports and stuff like that. That's great, but as I said, my personal opinion, RAW, the way to go. Number 4 is something I was very guilty of, and as a little bit of a confession, I'm still kind of guilty of nowadays, and that's not knowing my camera and what it's capable of doing. So this is kind of a two-part thought here. The first thing that I really implore people to do is when they get their first camera is to really understand it, kind of how all the button layouts are and where it all and how it all works. Because it really does actually help speed up how you're shooting and when you are shooting. I know when I first got my 5D Mark III, I was fumbling around for a long time trying to figure out, I'm trying to change this, where's the button for that, where's the menu option for that, and I would definitely recommend sitting down, maybe spending, an afternoon kind of figuring out where all the buttons are, and just, pointing up, shooting, and then trying to change settings, just so you can kind of get a feel for where all the buttons are, so it becomes like a second nature kind of thing. And the second part to this is a little bit more complicated, and it takes a little bit longer, and that's understanding the limitations and the capabilities of your camera. Now, I remember when I was shooting on my Canon 40D, which is a camera I love to death, it's because one of the reasons why I do love it is because I knew it inside and out. But one limitation I really did start to hit, especially when I jumped over to doing landscape photography, was I was really hitting its limit on dynamic range. So that's why I decided to invest in my 5D Mark III. But you should also be looking at your camera for what it is completely capable of doing. Now, I know for my 5D Mark III, it does a whole lot more than I could ever do. And up until about 6 months ago, or even less than that really, I didn't use this for video. I was using my webcam, which you see behind me, and I had a 5D Mark III and I wasn't using it for video. So this is something you should just consciously be thinking about, is, thinking, hey, what else can this camera do? And kind of just understanding it and learning it a little bit more. We're really guilty of, once we understand the things we want to know, we just don't learn anything else. So constantly always look to try and figure something else out that you can do with your camera, because these cameras are really quite powerful. So they're definitely capable of doing a lot more than we use them for. So that's something you should definitely be thinking about. This last mistake is something I think every photographer struggles with, whether you're a beginner or a pro, but it's something I am very passionate about, and is understanding and learning composition. Now, I'm not going to go into details about what you should be doing and what you should be looking for composition, rule of thirds and leading lines and all that kind of stuff. I want you to go watch a video. Here on YouTube, there's a great, amazing class by Scott Kelby called Crush the Composition. Now, it was originally a class for the online training website, kelby1.com, originally of kelbytraining.com back then, but Kelby Media did a Google Plus conference a couple years ago, and Scott was very gracious enough to share the entire class on stage called Crush the Composition. This is one of my favorite classes that they have on their entire website, and that says a lot. I watch this class at least once, if not twice a year, as a really great refresh. Scott's really nailed it down on kind of teaching you the ideas of composition. Now, of course, he does do all the things like leading lines and, rule of thirds and all that stuff, but that is not, it's useful to know for composition, but of course there's much more subtleties to that. You can have a great composition technically, but the image can suck. He really breaks that down and shows you what you should be looking for in your compositions. So it's here on YouTube. I've got links down below in the description. I'll put a thumbnail somewhere and a little, that little eye suggestion thing that's now popped up. So that'll be somewhere in one of these corners here for you to go check out. It's in the description. I really recommend you watch it. It's about an hour long, maybe a little bit longer than that, but it's something that I implore every photographer to watch. It's one of my favorite classes, and anytime anybody asks about online training, those are the guys I go to, but that class in particular is something I'm very passionate about, because I watch it all the time and I learn something new every single time, so definitely go and check that out. So I've done the 5 mistakes here, but I want to cover one more thing, and it's not necessarily a mistake, that's why I'm kind of tacking it onto the end here, but it's definitely something people should be thinking about, especially when they're starting, and that is shooting more interesting subjects. Now, I know when I first started out, I was always kind of disappointed with my images, especially when I compared it to professionals. Now, besides all the lighting and all that kind of stuff, there was always something that felt felt a little bit different, and that is the fact that the subjects that were in my pictures simply weren't as interesting as the subjects in the professional pictures. Now, there's a quote I love from Joe McNally, which is this: "If you want more interesting photographs, you gotta be shooting more interesting people." So while he was referring to portraits in that quote, I definitely think it's something that you can look at in a fairly wide range of photography. Now, I'm going to compare it here to me personally as landscapes, and if you've got a comparison, I'd love to hear it in the comments below. But for me, for landscapes, it kind of resonated with me a little bit, because many people, when they do start out doing landscape stuff, they just generally go around their local area. Now, some people are very lucky and they live in amazing locations. I'm at least fairly lucky that our place back in the UK rather, is very near North Wales, which has got some amazing locations. But for most people, they don't necessarily have nice locations around them, so their pictures end up subpar, even if they have great light, great composition. If you were to compare something that was shot in, something with the same light and the same composition, but the subject simply wasn't as interesting, the professional one that has more interesting subjects, in theory, would be much nicer. So that's something to constantly be thinking about, is always to be trying to shoot more interesting things. Now, of course, this is related to all types of photography, like portrait photography or product photography. You want a nicer looking product, you want a nicer looking person, that's just a fact of life. If you're shooting portraits and you have someone that's, good looking but not great, and you compare it to like a model, you'll definitely be more inclined to like the picture of the model, even if it's exactly the same lighting, same composition, as I said before, because it is a more interesting subject. It is more pleasing to your eyes. So it's definitely something worth thinking about. It's not really a mistake as such, but it's something I think many beginners don't really think about, but they consciously, or at least subconsciously, recognize in their images. So those are the 5+1 mistakes that I made when I started in photography. So what mistakes did you make when you started in photography? I'd love to hear them in the comments below. Were they some of the mistakes I covered here in this video, or did I not cover them? You yelling at your screen now saying, "Craig, you missed this one thing." I'd love to hear it in the comments below, and we can discuss all these different things. As I said at the beginning of the video, these aren't simply these are the very few mistakes you make when you begin. We make a bunch of mistakes, and that is part of being a beginner and learning. But I wanted to kind of help you guys along and hopefully help you not make the same mistakes I did, or at least kind of get you going in the right track to be, correcting these mistakes. So again, I'd love to hear what your comments are and what your thoughts are below. I'd love to hear from you guys. What mistakes did you make? Let's discuss. If this is your first time here, I'd love to have you subscribe. I do weekly photography videos, kind of doing a whole bunch of different aspects of photography, whether it's gear or tips or tutorials, or kind of just ideas and me spewing things out for you to kind of understand and learn a little bit more about photography. One type of video I do that is becoming quite popular now is actually vlogging. Now, it's not just me sitting in front of my desk talking to a camera like I'm doing now. I actually go out and shoot pictures and bring a little video camera with me. I bring you guys along for the entire ride, from the beginning to the end, going to the location, shooting the location, the trial and tribulations and errors I make on location, because I am human, I make mistakes. So if that's something that kind of interests you, I talk about the entire process of shooting the picture from beginning to end. I give you my settings, I show you preview images, all that kind of cool, fun stuff. So if that kind of interests you, or all the other stuff I've talked about here, I'd love to have you subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. Of course, you don't have to if you don't want to, but if that's something you're interested in, it might be something worth doing. So again, thanks for watching. I've been Craig McCormick, and I'll catch you in the next one.